What does the right to keep and bear arms really mean? Let's get into it. Welcome to the Armed Citizen channel. My name is Mark, and I do this video mentorship for all armed citizens, be they new or experienced. I talk about the things that I think no one else talks about. So please, like my videos, subscribe, and share them with people of all political persuasions. Let's get into the content. I sincerely believe that the men who wrote the Constitution of the United States were inspired by divine providence. If not by the hand of God himself, then most certainly his angels. And the three most important words in that document are "we the people," which I feel we have forgotten.
Hear me. Hear this! No words have said this thing of importance in quite this way. Look at these three words written larger than the rest, with a special pride never written before or since. Tall words, proudly saying, "We the people." These words and the words that follow were not written only for the Yangs, but for the Coms as well.
The Coms.
They must apply to everyone, or they mean nothing. Do you understand?
Over 200 years ago, our forefathers started an experiment that had never been tried before in history, a concept where the people hold the power and delegate some of it to the government, not the government holding the power. And when this kind of government is run by the type of people that our founding fathers were, namely a moral and religious people, well, Ronald Reagan said it best in his first inaugural address.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price.
And I could go on and on and on about this for another 6 hours, but I'm not, don't worry. I use that to preface the second most important phrase in the Constitution, which are the 10 words of the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Because without an armed populace, all of the freedoms we currently enjoy are only granted and revoked at the whim of the government. I recently learned this. James Madison wrote the original version of the Second Amendment, which was whittled down to the 27 words we currently have. Let's go over the original. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia comprised of the body of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. It is possible that had this been our Second Amendment, we would not be in the current state of affairs we are over firearms. I highly doubt it because, tyrants got a tyrant. A disarmed populace are not citizens. They are subjects. The full term, if you didn't know it, is subjects to the crown. And that doesn't sit very well with most, if not all, Americans. And I say it that way because I truly believe that being a citizen of the United States and being an American are two totally different things. You can be one, you can be the other, or you can be both. Many people in this country are both. The rest are just citizens. Without, as Madison said, a free people properly trained to arms, this experiment in freedom fails. It fails in death and blood, as so many other times it has before, if you only have the courage to read the unvarnished history. We will now take this 10-word phrase apart, and we're going to start with the last word, arms. What are arms? Arms are weapons, tools we can use to extend our will upon others. Arms started out as fists and feet, upgraded to sticks and stones, progressed to swords and spears, and today the common personal arms are firearms, namely the pistol, shotgun, and rifle. In today's society, the most effective arm is going to be some version of a firearm. A 5-foot, 100-pound woman armed with a pistol and trained in its use can successfully resist one or more men intent upon doing her harm, something impossible for her to do without it. I am sure that this is what our founding fathers intended for you and I to have today when they wrote the Second Amendment. It was the clear intent of our founding fathers that the average citizen is to be just as well armed as the standard infantryman of the day, whether that day be in 1779 when the Revolutionary War ended, 1792 when the Bill of Rights was ratified, or today in 2025. Looking back to our founding, the militiaman, the Minuteman, the individual, the true citizen soldier who stood next to the professional soldiers of the Continental Army and against the redcoats of the British Army were armed identical to the soldiers they stood with and against. All three groups had the same combat loadout, which was a rifle or musket, a bayonet for the end of it, and about 20 rounds of pre-made ammunition in little pieces of paper like this. Now, there are some weapons of today that are meant specifically for use in war, like machine guns, grenades, anti-tank rockets, and so on, that have no day-to-day civilian use, and we will talk about those more in depth in a later video. All that being said, I should be able to go down to my local gun store and purchase an M4 carbine. Or, like the Swiss, have one issued to me and every other citizen when they turn 18. But that's just how I feel, along with a few 100 million other well-armed Americans. I really hate interrupting myself mid-tirade, but I just wanted to put in a real quick reminder to please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with all of your friends. That's how I grow this channel and get to more people. So, all right, back to myself. The M4 carbine looks identical to an Armalite rifle Model 15 at a casual glance. The one difference is the selector switch. On both weapons, when the arrow points toward the muzzle, the weapon is safe. When the arrow points upwards, they are ready to fire in semi-automatic mode. One trigger pull, one round fired. Only on the M4 can you rotate it another 90 degrees so the arrow faces toward the wielder. When it points in that direction, it can fire 3-round bursts automatically. So that's what arms are. The next part are the words to keep and bear. These words simply mean to own and effectively use. That's why I constantly talk about training. Unless a citizen is trained to arms, as Madison's Second Amendment said, they cannot wield their firearm effectively and judiciously. An untrained armed citizen will be a danger to all, not just their attacker. Constitutionally speaking, there should be as few laws as possible, if any, that restrict a citizen's ability to own any kind of personal defense weapon. I use the term personal defense to prevent any idiotic arguments about people owning nuclear weapons or other such foolishness. Now, there is always a non-zero chance that you are seconds away from getting into a fight for your life. That fight for your life may be to a vehicle crash, a natural disaster, or a scumbag miscreant who wants to have their way with you. My preferred tools to counter that last threat will probably not be your preferred tools. We, as citizens, need to be free of the restrictions of government to select the defensive tools that work best for us, not what the government thinks we should have, if they allow us to have any at all. Next comes of the people. The term people are used in 4 of the 10 amendments, namely the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 10th. Those against the civilian ownership of firearms have repeatedly asserted that people in the Bill of Rights means an individual only 75% of the time, because they assert people in the Second Amendment means collective, as in militia. Let me bring up Madison's version again, and you tell me if the people as referred here are meant to be collective or individual. And then we come to the first word, right. And right is one of those words that everyone knows what it means, but no one can accurately describe it. And that's unfortunately understandable given our modern education system. We have 2 different kinds of rights. We linguistically differentiate them by describing them as either a big R right with a capital R or a small r right with a lowercase r. Big R rights are granted by God, who created the universe we live in. Those who don't believe in a deity might use the term the law of nature or the law of the universe. Long before there was a government, even before something like a village leader who told everyone else what to do, we all had big R rights. People have this big R right to be able to defend themselves, be it from the gangbanger down the street, and certainly from the bureaucrat or oppressive politician in a distant capital. I like to say big R rights precede and exceed any form of government, because they have existed since life sprung up on the earth, and they still exist no matter how much some governments try to legislate them away. The right to defend ourselves has always been in force all throughout time. Every animal, every being has the right and obligation to fight to continue its existence. And in the time of governments, if the government says that you can't defend yourself, as some governments still do to this day, you can still and are obligated to defend yourself. The bad news is there will be criminal penalties attached, inflicted by the government. However, you can still defend yourself. So big R rights precedes and exceeds any and all government. Now comes the term small r right. These are usually granted by government. Everyone knows about the Bill of Rights. We've already talked about them. And if you actually read all 10 of them and most of the other amendments, you can see how they are worded as recognizing that every person has the rights they talk about just by being alive, and the amendments are there to make sure the government doesn't curtail these rights. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. The Second Amendment, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and so on. All of these amendments recognize rights as a birthright to all beings, and the amendments restrict the power and authority of the government to muck with those big R rights. The amendments do not grant these rights to the people, which is another unfortunate indictment of our education system. Now, unless you have studied history, you probably don't know about Franklin Delano Roosevelt's second Bill of Rights, which he presented in 1944. These are small R rights, which include the right to a job, right to a living wage, right to good housing, medical care, and more. Behind every one of these small R rights is the government compelling one person to perform labor for the benefit of another and not themselves. And just as quickly and easily the government grants these rights, the government can claim budget cuts or some other hogwash and revoke those small R rights. As I record this, we're facing a Social Security crisis where we have an imminent threat from that our disabled and elderly will receive less benefits and get them even later in life because government has actively refused to actually fix the issue for over 40 years now. If you are dependent on the government for those rights, well, it does not end well for you. It is said our republic, not democracy, our republic rests on a foundation of 4 boxes: the soap box, the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. The soap box relates to being able to speak your mind in public on anything and not have the government silence you. The ballot box gives the citizens a say in who makes the decisions of government. The jury box gives us the opportunity not to just decide on if a person is guilty or innocent as accused by the government, but if the law itself is good and just. And if all of those fail, the only box to remain is the cartridge box, as the force of arms becomes the last resort to rein in an overbearing and tyrannical government. This is why the big R right to keep and bear arms is a big R right that precedes and exceeds government. It allows the citizen to say no to the government and make it stick. And if you believe Joe Biden when he says this,
if you wanted to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons.
I'm saying no, we don't. On the opening morning of deer season in Pennsylvania, just Pennsylvania, there will be more men and women in those fields and forests hunting deer than we have in all of the uniformed branches: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Coast Guard. And these Pennsylvanians are camouflaged to the point where no one sees them unless they wear the orange hunter safety vests or you have infrared equipment. These armed citizens can plant a high-powered rifle round into a target about the size of a dinner plate several hundred yards away. And when you throw in states like Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, and all of the other states that have high levels of armed citizens who are determined to keep their freedoms, what chance does the military really have? Unless the military wants to start a genocide and starts wiping out whole states, the army will lose. We couldn't conquer Iraq or Afghanistan in 20 years. What makes you think they're going to take Kentucky? And a trade of 50 armed citizens to take out one soldier, that's a net win for the citizens. So it all boils down to the right to keep and bear arms is a way for the citizen to protect himself and family and tell the government no and have the ability to make it stick. Thomas Jefferson said it most eloquently: when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. So I have to ask, which do you want? Liberty or tyranny? Y'all have yourselves a wonderful day. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. Just one last request that you like and subscribe and share with your friends, and send me some feedback on the way so I know where to go and what I might have messed up. Y'all have yourselves a wonderful day.